Hello, I hope you are doing well. My name is Jacqueline Vino from Golosso Learning Solutions, and welcome to this Nano recording. Today, we are going to discuss one of the latest ASUs that has come from the FASB, which is ASU 2025-09. This ASU focuses really on clarifying and improving certain aspects of hedge accounting, especially in light of the global reference rate reform initiatives that have really changed how a lot of organizations have been managing their interest rate risk. Our goal today is to walk through the background and the scope of this standard, highlight the 5 key issues that this ASU addresses, and then cover the effective date and transition guidance as well. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. The full title of this ASU is Derivatives and Hedging, Topic 815, Hedge Accounting Improvements, and this was issued by the FASB in November of 2025. So why did the FASB decide to issue this standard? The main driver is the need to clarify certain aspects of hedge accounting guidance and to address incremental hedge accounting issues that have come as a result of the global reference rate reform initiative. Now, if you have taken GLS courses in the past, you will already know that reference rate reform has been something we've been talking about at GLS for years now. But if you haven't heard of it before, I'm just going to give you the quick Spark Notes version. But basically, for over 30 years, we had LIBOR, and LIBOR stands for the London Interbank Offered Rate. And this was the premier global benchmark interest rate that was used to set rates for trillions of dollars in financial contracts. Think about things like your mortgages, corporate loans, derivatives, all of this was tied to LIBOR. And basically, it represented the average rate that major banks estimated they would pay to borrow from each other. So what went wrong with this? Well, it turns out that LIBOR had a lot of problems. So it was unreliable, it was subject to manipulation. There were some scandals that happened where traders were caught rigging LIBOR to benefit their derivatives position and present healthier images for their banks. And this led to fines, this led to jail time for some individuals. And a lot of this was coming to light during the 2008 financial crisis, where the banks were artificially inflating their rates or potentially even deflating them for profit, since it's calculated by what the banks were lending to each other. They were able to work together and sort of collude and manipulate that rate. So what happened as a result of that is LIBOR was replaced with SOFR, which is more stable, it's less subject to manipulation, and LIBOR was phased out over time, which a lot of that happened in 2021, and then the final US dollar settings ended in 2023. So it took nearly 15 years for LIBOR to completely go away, but as of now, LIBOR is no longer a thing. So as you can imagine, this change had very much a rippling effect as markets transitioned away from LIBOR and were implementing SOFR rates and other new rates. There are new instruments and structures that emerged as a result of that, and practice questions inevitably followed. So the board's intent with this ASU is to improve the operability, reduce some diversity in practice, and make hedge accounting more closely reflect an entity's risk management activities in today's environment. So the changes here are very targeted. They affect several important areas of cash flow and fair value hedging. So who is included in the scope of this standard? This applies to any entity, whether public, private, or nonprofit, that elects to apply hedge accounting in accordance with Topic 815. So if you are an organization and you do not apply hedge accounting at all, this ASU is not going to change accounting for you. Now, for organizations that do have hedge accounting, this ASU provides a lot of benefits, in my opinion. It gives us some additional flexibility. It gives us clarity around very different types of hedging relationships. So what are the main provisions of ASU 2025-09? They are organized really around 5 key issues. So we have issue number 1, which is similar risk assessment for cash flows. We have issue number 2, which is hedging forecasted interest payments on choose your rate debt instruments. Number 3 here is cash flow hedges of non-financial forecasted transactions. Number 4 is net written options as hedging instruments. And number 5, we have foreign currency denominated debt using a dual hedge strategy. Now, don't worry, even though that was a lot of different things, we're going to walk through each of these issues at a higher level so you can see what the changes are and kind of why that matters and what the impact is going to be for you. So issue number 1 here is going to focus on how entities assess the risk exposure for groups of forecasted transactions in cash flow hedges. So in the past, if you wanted to hedge a group of forecasted transactions, they all had to have the exact same risk. And that was something that was pretty strict. It made grouping a lot harder than it needed to be. Now they don't have to be the exact same risk. They just need to have a similar risk instead. So similar in this context is tied to whether the hedging derivative works well or is highly effective for each transaction in the group. So, right, giving a little bit more flexibility here. Used to be strict with the same exact thing. Now it's just similar. So giving us some more flexibility. So basically, we're going to check out that similarity when we first start the hedge, so at its inception, and then keep checking it over time. And in many cases, you can check this with a qualitative higher level assessment instead of doing that detailed math every single time. So this lets companies hedge larger, more realistic groups of transactions, reduces the chance of missed forecasts, and it better matches what they are actually doing in their risk management. Now, issue number 2, on the other hand, addresses hedging forecasted interest payments on variable rate debt instruments that allow the borrower to choose from different interest rate indexes. So some loans let the borrower pick from different interest rate indexes over the life of that loan, and these are called choose your rate debts. Now, historically, this is something that was really tricky to apply hedge accounting to those changing cash flows. Now, the new guidance gives us a more clear model for hedging these types of loans. The loan contract spells out which interest rate indexes and tenors the borrower can choose, and you can treat those choices as part of the same hedge without having to stop and restart hedge accounting every time that choice changes. So you're allowed to use simplified assumptions to judge both whether the forecasted interest payments are likely to occur and whether the hedge is effective. And you can use this model for existing choose your rate loans, for future ones, and replacement of those loans as well. But you can't stretch this model to other types of arrangements. So overall, this makes hedge accounting for these instruments much more workable, and it also reduces unexpected hedge failures. Issue number 3, this expands, and it's all about hedging forecasting purchases or sales of non-financial items, right? So think about things like commodities or inventory. Now, previously, you were mostly limited to hedging price components that were explicitly written into the contract. Now, as long as certain criteria are met, you can hedge forecasted spot purchases or sales. You can hedge forward purchases or sales. You can even hedge subcomponents of pricing formulas that are clearly tied to the item you're buying or selling. Now, the key here is that the variable price component you're hedging must be clearly or closely related to the underlying non-financial asset. So that clearly and closely related test replaces the older, more narrow focus on, only what's explicitly specified in the agreement, which opens up the door to hedging more realistic pricing components. Now, this helps companies reduce missed forecasts and align hedge accounting more closely with how they are actually going to manage non-financial price risk. It also clarifies that if a contract itself is a derivative, you can still treat its variable price component as the hedged risk, so long as you meet the other hedge accounting rules. Alrighty, and then we have issue number 4 here, which is the net written options as hedging instruments. And this has to do with LIBOR once again. So over time, the loan and swap markets has evolved, especially as LIBOR went away after all of those scandals that happened. Some hedging instruments are now structured as compound derivatives that combine a swap with a written option. Now, previously under GAAP, there was basically a test to make sure you didn't have a net written option as your hedging instrument, which could cause problems for these compound derivatives. New guidance removes the requirement to apply that net written option test to a compound derivative that includes a swap plus a written option when it's used as a hedging instrument in a cash flow or fair value hedge of interest rate risk. So basically, in plain terms here, this makes it easier to use these more modern market standard instruments in hedge accounting without being tripped up on things just because there's a net written option piece inside this combined derivative. And then issue number 5 here. So this deals with dual hedge strategies involving foreign currency denominated debt instruments. So some companies use one foreign currency denominated debt instrument for 2 purposes at once. One of them is as a hedging instrument in a net investment hedge, so to hedge their investment in a foreign operation, and also as a hedged item in a fair value hedge of interest rate risk. So this dual hedge strategy could create mismatches in how gains and losses were recognized and presented on the financial statements. The new guidance fixes that by requiring companies to exclude the fair value hedge basis adjustment on the debt from the net investment hedge effectiveness test. Again, a little bit of a mouthful here, but this means that gains and losses from remeasuring that basis adjustment at the spot exchange rate go straight to earnings right away now. So you're not allowed to extend this approach to other situations. It's specifically for this dual hedge setup. I want to be very, very clear about that. But the result is financial statements that better show the true economic offset of both the interest rate and the foreign currency risks when this dual hedge strategy is being used. All right, so now let's very quickly cover the effective date and the transition of this standard. So for public business entities, ASU 2025-09 is effective for annual reporting periods beginning after December 15th of 2026, including interim periods within those annual reporting periods. Now for entities other than public business entities, the ASU is effective for annual reporting periods beginning after December 15th of 2027, right? So we get an extra year. And for interim periods within those annual reporting periods, early adoption is also permitted on any date on or after the issuance of this update. Now, entities should also apply these amendments on a prospective basis for all hedging relationships. An entity may elect to adopt the amendments for hedging relationships that exist as of the date of adoption. And that is all we have for today, folks. If staying up to date with the FASB is part of your job, consider taking our FASB update course that has all of the recently issued ASUs from the FASB. Additionally, if you're interested in taking CPE from GLS, we included a QR code for you here. We have lots of different courses in accounting, auditing, government and nonprofit A&A, for your Yellow Book requirements, as well as leadership and professional development courses. So once again, my name is Jacqueline Vino from Golosso Learning Solutions. Thank you so much for tuning into this Nano course, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.